range of experience. Cool. And I was going to ask about the recording. Thank you. Great to see the range of experience that you guys have with document understanding. For an introduction, I'm a solution engineer here at UiPath, focusing on AI ML products, especially document understanding and AI Center. Both of those products are kind of tied to core document processing at UiPath. I'll be going through a couple of topics, and then I'll pass it over to Lahiru, who's actually going to give some great information on best practices and lessons learned from an example of building a document processing solution. And then we'll actually cap off with some discussion on product roadmap and solution accelerators that was mentioned before. These solution accelerators we're pretty excited about. We're hoping that they can streamline some of your development process when you build these document processing automations. I'll start with an introduction to document understanding, since some of you are new to document understanding. Some are seasoned veterans, it sounds like, so this might be a little bit of review. But document processing at a high level to start is something that is present within every organization, within almost all departments, like we just saw with that poll question, right? There's a lot in finance and accounting that you guys are working on. There's opportunities in HR, there's opportunities in supply chain, and it's primarily because document processing use cases are often just plentiful in cumbersome, time-intensive operations, where there's opportunity to go ahead and help alleviate some of the processing time or manual processing time that is required to get information from the document into your downstream systems. And that's where we have seen document understanding really help out. We've seen customers, like you see here, get great value from being able to go ahead and use document understanding and the rest of the UiPath platform to build intelligent document processing solutions that accelerates the productivity of their existing teams, but also gives them scenarios where they're processing documents with higher accuracy. They're being able to meet certain their compliance regulations and policies, and then providing a better customer experience for the people that are actually sending them the documents or their end customers. At a high level, when we start kind of getting into what are the key steps for actually how you build an intelligent document processing solution within UiPath, we first start by receiving documents. And UiPath document understanding allows you to go ahead and take in documents that have multiple languages. They can be various formats. They can have things like tables, checkboxes, handwriting, signatures, or even have different kinds of quality. They could be scanned or they could be native PDFs. And once you receive those documents, you then kind of go through usually the same 3 steps. You digitize the information from that PDF or from a document. You classify that document to really understand, hey, what kind of document am I looking at here? And then you extract information from that document. So you actually identify, what pieces of information I actually want to go ahead and pull from that document. Once you have that, usually you pass it on to the human in the loop piece if there's an exception. So if you need validation, you go ahead and have someone review that document, the actual extraction results. Or if you don't need that, you can go ahead and then route that downstream using a UiPath automation to get data into a system of record, or to go ahead and start processing that data in a different format, really kind of performing any other actions you need in your business process. In this key step here, step number 2, you're also able to go ahead and incorporate a feedback loop for the classification and extraction step if you're using some of our more AI ML related capabilities, where you can take the data that you've collected from this validation step, go ahead and route that into your model's training data set or any training data sets that you have for classification and extraction, and then use that to improve the model performance, use that to go ahead and create a new model version so that you can see if it has better model performance than the current model that you have in production. And the last thing that we're really going to focus on here today is, is this audit and analyze piece, where you can go ahead and actually use the platform and document understanding to really understand and monitor operational metrics, business value related metrics, to understand the performance that you're receiving with your solution and the business value that you're receiving and providing back to your organization or teams. We'll get right into that. So we're actually going to go ahead and outline why exactly we'll want to track value for your document processing automations and how exactly we recommend you do that. To start, I want to lay out a scenario that of just processing 10,000 documents. When you process a batch of documents, it can, like we discussed earlier just now, it can go in a couple of ways. It could be untouched, where business rules have been able to go ahead and validate the piece of information that have been extracted, but it could also require human in the loop. It might have been deemed as an exception. There might have been a business rule that flagged a certain prediction that was generated, and or it could have been tied to an issue that we call system processing issues, where there might have been an OCR digitization issue, maybe some handwriting wasn't digitized correctly because the handwriting was sloppy, or it could have been that the model didn't find the value you were looking for, and you know that on your documents you need an invoice number if you process invoices, or you need a PO number if you process PO-based invoices. In addition to when we talk about handling system processing issues, usually a document specialist will go into our guided validation interface, validate those system processing issues, and then you can actually use that data and start to really see trends for how exactly is my solution performing on each field or each classification requirement that I have in my business process. And you can start to use those trends to actually start creating business rules, or know how you want to go ahead and actually fine tune and train your model, or even report and provide feedback back to the UiPath team so we can improve the product in a future release. The other side of this is when you get an exception that is not tied to the system processing category, but it's tied to an external influence. So you actually have scenarios where it was a valid exception. You wanted to make sure you caught this exception because there was a mismatch with your system of record between the info in the system of record and the document extracted from, the information extracted from the document, like an address, for example. There might have been the wrong tax rate, or maybe even a duplicate was found. You want to make sure you don't process the same invoice twice, because that means you're paying it out more than once and you're losing money there. All of these, you have the benefit sometimes of being able to automate the resolution of these. So you can go ahead and automate the email that's sent back to the customer or vendor that sent you that document. You can go ahead and automate filing away that duplicate that you might not need to process again. And that's still value gain, because you're not going to have to process those manually, and you're still saving your team time from what they would have had to do before having this kind of implementation in place with document understanding. The key thing here is making sure that for all these different pathways that a document can take, we want to make sure that we're collecting these metrics and we're tracking all of these events, whether it's untouched, whether it's kind of a document that's in the system processing or external influence category, and we're tracking it via UiPath Insights or some kind of visualization tool. And the example that we'll talk about is with UiPath Insights. Insights might be a new service for you all. It might be something that you guys already use. In our experience, we see Insights as a great tool where you can take data from orchestrator and robot log data, you can take automation hub data, but for this use case, this scenario we're discussing, you can take the data log from your document understanding automations and use that to go ahead and start to track operations and business value. And the way that we usually see customers doing this is they'll ask themselves, hey, how do I actually track my team's operations? How can I be sure my automations bring value? It's with Insights they're going to be able to actually answer those kinds of questions. And within Insights, you have the ability to create custom dashboards. You also have the ability to utilize out-of-the-box templates. And there's an array of out-of-the-box templates separate from document understanding, but there's also some document understanding templates in preview right now that give you a good head start on creating these custom dashboards to really make sure that you're tracking specifically the requirements that you need, the metrics that you need to be aware of for your specific document understanding use cases. I just recapped, quickly went over, hey, what exactly is Insights and what is it used for? How we actually go about using it now, and kind of closing out that end-to-end loop from, hey, if I am starting a project, what exactly are the steps I need to do? We try to boil that down to a framework that you can follow. And the first thing is just identifying questions you need answered. How am I going to actually define if this project is successful or not? What exactly do I need to know about my operations as time goes on? What info am I going to need to troubleshoot or investigate an issue if an exception arises, whether it's external influence or system processing. And once we have those questions identified, we then want to identify and determine the metrics and calculations to answer those questions. We want to know, hey, what business process focused metrics are tied to project success, what solution performance focused metrics like number of system exceptions per week, which of those are tied to my troubleshooting or my investigation that I'm going to have to do to make sure my solution is performing as I need it to be. And once we have that, we can go ahead and actually configure our automation to log the required metrics. Right? We'll be able to basically say, okay, I know what questions I need answered. I know how I'm going, theoretically or logically to calculate the metrics that I need to answer those questions. Now let me go ahead and make sure I have the data available to actually perform those calculations, or to allow UiPath to perform those calculations. And that's going to be through making sure that your automation you build within UiPath Studio has those logs in place to make sure we can calculate them, to calculate the metrics. And then last, we can build our dashboards. We can go ahead and actually start to say, okay, from the metrics we've identified, how am I actually going to organize? What kind of dashboards am I going to build? How am I going to organize these metrics? Am I going to have a business value dashboard and a solution performance dashboard? Am I going to have, a single transaction dashboard for kind of specific troubleshooting that I can filter on specific transactions with? And then am I going to have a multiple transactions dashboard where all the transactions that I've processed are kind of aggregated and I see a high level overview of my solution performance? We'll talk more about this later on and kind of what we recommend at minimum for document processing scenarios. I will now walk through an example of using this framework and really more specifics on each of these steps. The first is this Q&A step of identifying the questions we need answered. And the key thing that you should always be doing when getting started or implementing these is identifying the key value drivers, or how do I deem this project successful? Oftentimes for document processing use cases, it's tied to time savings, increased throughput, avoiding costs, or providing faster responses to your customers. These are things that you're going to want to make sure your reporting and your monitoring has included and you're always keeping track of. And then the next thing is actually understanding how exactly we make sure that we kind of keep track of what factors impact each of these key value drivers. And so if we look at usually the core steps or the common steps of a document processing automation, we can go ahead and start to ask ourselves questions at each of these stages that are going to impact our key value drivers. So what fields am I actually going to be extracting from my documents? And then go ahead and actually start saying, okay, well, I know I'm going to have this information extracted from the documents, but what business rules am I going to apply, and what possible exceptions could occur? Are there different priorities for those exceptions that I want to make sure I am aware of more than others? For the human validation step, that is often a critical component. What is the actual performance that I'm seeing, or what is the actual average handling time that I'm seeing when a business user or someone on my team does need to validate an exception, right? Is that something that people are performing easily, or do I need to go in and actually make sure that they're aware of all the shortcuts and kind of the different guided validation tools and steps in there to streamline that validation process? And then lastly, what is the actual output accuracy? So when I go ahead and kind of take the output from the document processing solution and I route it into my downstream system, am I actually receiving a document that's been approved and submitted? Or am I for some reason seeing submission exceptions, which I want to be aware of and really understand the reasons for why they might be rejected or why they might not be approved, if it's a business rule process or if there's something wrong with my actual automation? All of these are going to help us really understand those key value drivers that we're going to be keeping track of within UiPath Insights, within your reporting and monitoring tool. After we identify all those questions that we want answered at each of those steps, we can go ahead and start to really understand the metrics that are going to help us calculate those answers. And this is an example of one of the questions we might ask ourselves is, hey, what are the most frequent reasons a document is rejected? And we can start by understanding, hey, the metric I need is the most frequent rejection reasons. I need to understand kind of how those are outlined and how those are sorted. Well, for that, I need to really understand the reason frequency. So for any business exception reason that is logged, I need to understand the number of times it occurs. And the way that I do that is I need to actually understand or have somewhere within my data the specific reasons for extraction and classification and why they might have been tied to a certain document. From this data model or from this tree that we're creating, we can go ahead and actually then take the leaves of this tree, so the rejection reason for extraction and the rejection reason for classification, and really start to understand what is the data that we need to make sure we log in our automation. Because we know that if we log these two pieces of data for each document, we will then be able to take across all the documents that we process, take all that information and calculate the frequency that each reason occurs. And we'll be able to then go ahead and sort that information and see where we have the most frequent rejection reasons. We can do this same exercise with a more complicated question of, hey, how much time is my department saving each week? We can start with time savings. We know that we want to go ahead and actually find the difference between the total time spent in our automated process, the total time spent in our as-is process. And we can start to identify the key factors that are tied to the time spent calculations, things like how many documents am I processing? What is the manual intervention rate? What is the average handling time or average amount of time required to validate a document in Action Center? Sorry. And then from that, we can continue building our data model until we get to our bottom level, where again, we can say, okay, look, I know that if I log these key pieces of information for each of my documents, I will then be able to work up my tree and perform the calculations necessary to get to my key metric, to get to the answer for my question that I'm asking myself, which in this scenario is time savings. And sorry, lost my mouse here for a second. PowerPoint's thinking. 1 second. Let me try to stop and reshare my screen. Sorry about this, guys. We got some breath in here. Okay. All right. Let me go ahead and reshare my screen. All right. So hopefully you guys can see that. Sorry about that. So when we last left off on kind of creating this data model and understanding how we actually get to the metrics we need to log, which is kind of identifying the leaves of this tree. So when we kind of quickly recap, hey, how do I actually decide what data to log? We can go ahead and make sure that we create the data model first, look at the bottom level of our data model, the leaves of this tree, make sure that we log that information in our automation workflow. And then more specifically, I like to think of kind of three key categories or three buckets you can really use to decide whether you log data in your automation or whether you just calculate it in insights. So for example, this validation duration metric, you could have calculated that in insights, but it also isn't difficult to calculate that in your automation workflow. So you want to understand when you create these data models, hey, is it going to be easier to go ahead and just calculate this in insights? Is it going to be easier to calculate and log via my workflow? Or does it really have to be logged in my workflow? Because if I don't have it logged in my workflow, I'm not going to have it available in insights. All right, clicking is working now in PowerPoint. In Insights, when you start using Insights, click disclaimer, you are going to have some new concepts if you haven't used it before. There's going to be things like dimensions and table calculations and measures The key thing to make note of is that these are all just metrics. So dimensions, table calculations, and measures, all just metrics. A dimension for your information, for your awareness, at its core is what we log in our automation. It's kind of the foundation of our data for how we start to build our dashboards within Insights. These are defined in Studio. They're logged by the robot and they'll be made available for you in Insights. A measure is going to be an aggregation or a calculation across many rows. So it's going to be able to use these dimensions and actually kind of perform some kind of operation like the sum or finding the frequency, the count that each of these dimensions occur in or a certain value occurs with. Table calculation is a little bit similar to dimension, but it's going to be tied to a specific visual. It's going to allow you to perform kind of ad hoc calculations where, for example, I might want to take an original dimension that I have, like my full name, and actually just perform some formatting. So I want to go ahead and actually just transform that data somehow with a calculation like finding the last name within a first name, taking the substring of that info. The main outline of how we actually go about getting data from Studio into Insights, we're going to walk through that right now. So we talked about logging the necessary piece of information in your automation. That's done through custom logging or using cube-related activities within Studio. Once you do that step, you can go ahead and publish your automation, and then that automation will be executed by a robot. The robot will log that data, and it'll be stored in Orchestrator. And then Insights is going to read that data so you can go ahead and actually have available within Insights to start building your dashboards. And the main recommendation or this last step in the framework is actually building the dashboards. And at minimum, what we recommend is having 2 dashboards for your document processing use case. One is the business process dashboard, kind of solution dashboard, where you're able to really see the aggregated results from the documents you've processed. This is going to allow you to see things like business value that you receive. You can track things like time savings. It'll also allow you to understand overall solution performance. What is my output accuracy? Things like model performance. How is the model performing? What is the average field accuracy that I'm seeing? And then in addition to this business process dashboard, you can have this document lifecycle dashboard that allows you to track specific document processing results. And this is going to be great to have because you'll be able to have an audit trail and specific document information to perform troubleshooting and investigating as needed. And that information will then allow you to make sure that you can really get to the granular level that you might need when investigating or tracking an exception. Some examples of metrics that we see for each of these dashboards, we talked about some of them already. So what exactly are the most frequent reasons a document is rejected? That's an example that you might see in a business process focused dashboard where we go ahead and kind of aggregate all the rejection reasons from all the documents that we processed, and we sort them to really understand what are the ones that are most frequently occurring. And then for the document lifecycle dashboard, we might want to understand how long it took to process a document. So as long as we have logged the different durations that occurred for each of the steps in our process, like digitization, classification, extraction, and so on, we can go ahead and actually calculate this for a specific document. So you can use the document lifecycle dashboard to see things like total processing time or any of the other metrics that you see here listed on the left. And then lastly, tied to this building dashboards portion of this last step in our framework, when you start to scale up your operations and you start to tack on additional use cases, the same framework applies. So you'll still be able to go ahead, and we still recommend having for each use case a document lifecycle dashboard, a business process dashboard, but then also in addition to that, if you're a center of excellence, you're helping manage a center of excellence, you can have another dashboard that really is an aggregate of all these different document processing use cases so that you can really understand how exactly each of these use cases is performing and which ones you might want to go ahead and take a closer look at. I will quickly show my screen to just provide an example of what this might look like in Insights. So here we can see, a dashboard in Insights that shows us some metrics tied to some key value drivers we want to be aware of. Things like our process performance, how much time is it usually taking to process these documents? What is the total time saved that I've seen from going ahead and actually having these document processing automations in place. And then, things tied to human validation, the average handling time. How much time am I usually spending validating classification tasks? How much time is my team usually spending validating extraction tasks? We want to make sure that that average handling time is reduced as much as possible, because that's going to be tied to our overall time savings and to just the manual effort required, from your team. We want to make sure that that's as smooth an experience as possible. Then lastly, things like extraction accuracy. These are things, tied to our model performance that we can go ahead and also use these kinds of dashboards to keep track of. Jump back to the slides. I will now pass it over to Lahiru to go ahead and talk about some document understanding best practices and lessons learned from a use case that him and his team put together for a customer.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Let me quickly share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay. All right. So hello everyone. So just for a quick intro, I'm Lahiru and I work for Boundaryless as a RPA lead and a practice lead for document understanding and AI. So today I'm going to show you a use case that we did for one of our clients, and this is one of my favorite use cases as well, because here we are actually talking about a different use case altogether. This is mainly for child adoption and welfare. So basically, what happens here is in the US, they take care about all these children who are going through different issues like drugs, alcohol, and all those things. So with this organization, they try to find a good foster parent for these children and make sure they have a good future. So to go through this process, they need to go through a whole lot of documentation for this application process. In general, they need to process more than 80 different document types to complete this application process. And if you really look at one particular document type, let's say, for example, legal documents, there can be so many different document types that fall into legal as well. So it's a scenario like that, and these documents are processed by various people who are involved in this process, and they send these documents, they combine all these documents together and fill everything, make sure it's okay from their side, and send it to the central division that takes care of the remaining stuff. So what they do is, once they receive the document, they go through this document, make sure everything is correct, and at the end, they need to, based on those different documents these guys put in together, they need to split these documents into different document types, and then finally upload into one of their state applications with certain data that they are going to extract from these documents. In the manual process, before the automation, that process actually took around 5 to 6 hours just to process one document. So that's how time consuming this manual process is. So as a solution, we introduced UiPath document understanding to reduce their manual effort. And as a result, the processing time actually got reduced to just 10 minutes from 6 hours. It's like 80% of time saving. So that with that time saving, they have a whole lot of time to take care of the children and make sure they get the proper attention and they have a good future. So this is a very interesting use case that we did. So while going through this use case from the start, we had several interesting scenarios that I'm going to show you. And we also came up with certain implementation approaches to take care of those things. So if you look at the first part here in the process and document standardization section, on the left-hand side, you'll see the identify scenarios. So the first point is a very interesting one. So I mentioned that these field workers who mostly interact with these documents, and they are the guys who create these. They follow so many different methods to create these documents. So basically, let's say you have a form that you need to fill. Some people will fill it digitally, some will scan it and then maybe handwrite on it, or maybe they will print, do the typing and then again scan it, something like that. So those are some methods. And in addition to that, we have also seen scenarios where they do annotations, they add comments, they even add attachments to these documents through PDF editing tools. And in addition to that, one of the interesting scenarios we identified was, so usually if you look at a document, the page size is usually the same, right? But in these documents, the page sizes were also different. So some pages may be like a A4, but in some pages it's huge as a banner, and some pages are very small. And some pages were actually hidden in the document based on the different tools they were using. So those are the various kind of scenarios we identified just within a document. To make sure we have a standard way of creating these documents, we actually introduced some document standardization steps that they need to follow before sending these documents into the automated process. And that actually made sure those kind of issues are not available in the document itself, so that they don't need to do back and forth communication asking, hey, this file is corrupted, give me the proper file, and those kind of stuff. That actually improved the processing time of these documents. In addition, the document quality. This was the next part, because these documents are created through various different sources. And when these documents come in to the automated flow, we need to make sure, because of this nature of the document, as I explained before, we need to make sure that documents are also going through some pre-processing steps to make sure it is in the proper quality. And if it's not, maybe we can do some grayscaling on those documents. So those kind of steps, depending on what we identified, we introduced into the document understanding workflow that actually improved the classification and extraction of the information. In addition to that, this process was also very manual. So we made sure, and it's an ongoing process. So there are so many people involved. So we also made sure that the process is also going through a continuous improvement stage so that we can improve the process as we go on. The next challenge that we had was from the people who do this itself. So I mentioned that there are like so many different document types. It was 80 document types, but depending on the document type, let's say the legal or the education documents, there can be so many documents that fall into that, right? So for example, if you say education, it could be some school certificates, it could be some degree certificates that people have done, could be marks or even some emails. So based on different people who perform this process, they had different thoughts on how they classify these documents. So for example, one guy will say it goes into category A. Another guy will say that, okay, this document will go to category B. So before implementing anything, we had to make sure we go through all those documents and identify what are the methods people follow to classify these documents and come up with a proper structure that everybody agrees upon. So that was another improvement that we did. And this we did all these things to make sure that the document understanding solution that we are going to build address a proper standardized process. And ultimately, our goal is to improve the document processing time and give them more time to take care of the children. So this process also had a lot of complex business rules. So once you extract the information, once you classify and extract that information, we also had to connect to some internal applications through API or database integrations to cross-validate the data. And I think this was one of the questions that was also asked in the chat. So this is your answer. Okay, so these are the challenges or the different scenarios we came across and the steps that we introduced through document understanding and some process improvement to make sure the solution works best for them. So that was the overall scenario. And when it comes to the document understanding solution, generally, as Daniel mentioned, we have like 3 steps. First part is the document collection. So wherever these documents are stored, it could be a shared drive, it could be a source application. We need to have a process that can extract the information or collect these documents and load it into a queue. So in general, for our scenario, this is a simple flow diagram. So what we do there is we just check what are the new documents that are available, and we also make sure that we are not processing duplicate the same document multiple times based on certain rules, because these documents are huge, and each document can have like 300, 400, and even more number of pages. So that's why we had to make sure we are not going to do any duplicates. So at the end, we collect all these documents based on a time trigger, and we load everything into a queue. And then comes the document understanding flow. So it's a queue trigger that actually triggers the document understanding process. So what happens with the queue trigger is you can configure that to actually run a process whenever a new item is added to the queue. So whenever a new item is added, the document understanding process will trigger to process that document. So in the DU process, we do the digitizing, classification, and a few other steps. I'll go into the detailed steps in the next slide. Here we just, what we do is we classify, and we, based on the classification, we create some sub files based on that, because we need to upload those things into the state application. And then finally, once we have all the information, we again load another couple of orchestrator queues with that information, and that gets executed again based on a time trigger. So another good benefit that they got with this approach is, so let's say there were like a lot of documents on a given date, and this time trigger runs at a specific time. But still, since there's a lot of volume that they need to process, this will keep on adding the documents to the queue. So even this guy overlaps the time here, both will run parallel, and it will keep on processing all the documents until it finishes. That was another advantage of breaking this into smaller processes. So in the last part, it just takes the information from the queue, log into the application, and perform everything that's needed. So that's a general RPA process. Looking at the document understanding flow in detail. So earlier I mentioned few scenarios that we identified. So based on that, in the digitize section in the document understanding template, by default, you see only one OCR engine, right? But we kind of did an assessment because we have so many documents that we are going through and trying to process. So we kind of selected few OCR engines and we actually did an OCR benchmarking kind of analysis to make sure what are the best OCRs that suits our process. And we identified that UiPath document OCR and the OmniPage OCR is the best fit for this particular use case. So we modify the digitized document workflow based on the scenarios we identified, and we introduce certain logic into it so that the bot will use either of these OCRs or even both if needed to digitize the documents. And then comes the classification part. So this is where the one of the difficult parts. So these documents are very unstructured, and we need to properly classify these documents into all those sub documents. And I also mentioned in a given time, there can be so many different variations. So to handle that, we used a machine learning classifier along with the intelligent keyword classifier. Why machine learning classifier is because these documents there's so much variation in these documents, and giving keywords for each and every variation is not really possible. So the machine learning classifier is the best option that we can go with. And the other requirement was to split these documents. So that functionality comes with intelligent keyword classifier. And this combination is actually very powerful. And that actually gave us a lot of a good level of accuracy in classifying this data or document. And once the classification is done, we also did some validations internally. And if there's some low confidence info, we go for manual verification for classification. And once everything is done, we do the splitting and merging these documents again, depending on basic categories. So, for example, there can be documents that has multiple pages that fit into a specific document. Maybe let's say a birth certificate, for example. So identifying all those things and splitting from the big document and creating that small document. Those are the things that we do. And once all that is done, then comes the data extraction part. And here we used a custom machine learning model along with a form extractor to extract information from structured documents that are inside this main document, depending on the type. So again, with this combination, we validate the data, and if we see any invalid or low confidence information, we also connect with the internal applications through API or database connections. They had a couple of applications, and we extract that information, do the cross validation to make sure our data is correct. And if anything is missing, we can also easily update it through this process. And then all that data goes to the queue, and that gets loaded to the final application. So this is the flow and the different key points that we did in the flow. So here I have a small video that I can show you on this process. So when it comes to the DU part, it mostly happens in the background. So there's nothing really to see on the screen. So I'll just take you through this. So basically, as you see in the screen, on this Windows Explorer side, you can see so many folders that were created by the bot. So what happens is it reads the big file, and depending on the classification, it creates all these folders and the subfolders inside each and everything, and creates all those files in the background. And it does the extraction depending on the document type and the structure, as I explained before. And then finally, what happens is, once that is done, it will automatically start the last part where it logs into this state application, start based on the data extracted, it will start extracting or assigning the required information or the cases to the account, and it will start uploading those documents automatically. So this is a process that goes on. These guys process a whole lot of documents, so it just keeps on going, and it actually reduces the processing time drastically. So they have a lot of time to take care of the children. So that's the use case that I wanted to share. That being said, next is the product roadmap and solution accelerators. So back to you, Daniel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lahiru. I will share my screen again. All right. And I gotta jump through some slides here. Sorry, I was looking at the Q&A, people asking good questions. So product roadmap quickly, I know we're short on time. So product roadmap and solution accelerators. Our team is focused on expanding capabilities for unstructured document processing. That's if you haven't seen or checked out some of the generative AI capabilities for querying documents, that are in preview right now. Strongly recommend doing that. We're also working on creating a tighter integration between communications mining and document understanding. One of the key things that is tied to your guys' success is really making sure you can get your automations in production as quickly as possible. Accelerating this time to value is it has been something that our product team has been working on this past year, and there are going to be some great features being announced shortly here at our annual conference and forward, and moving past that will really help accelerate that time to value and also improve the user experience. And then lastly, we're also going to be seeing some improvements and some enhancements to how you guys can really start tracking your document processing automations and take away some of the essentially manual logging that we discussed today, so that you can see a document audit trail and some solution performance or model performance. Separate from product roadmap, if you have not heard already, we've kind of been throwing around this term solution accelerators. These are kind of packaged up modules that you can find on our UiPath marketplace that are meant to streamline your development time. So just again, tied to accelerating your time to value. For document understanding, we have accelerators for each of the out-of-the-box models. So it's a great place to start if you're looking to go ahead and build an automation. If you know you're going to use invoices as your document type, or you're going to be processing purchase orders, they have built in 3 modules, one for receiving the documents, one for actually processing the documents, and then one for dispatching or kind of performing something with the document information. They also include things like, Visio files for solution design diagrams to help streamline your actual solution design process. Would recommend checking these out on our marketplace. We have one for each of these models that you see listed here. And then a quick reminder, I saw a lot in the Q&A, there are kind of questions on, hey, look, we're kind of talking about insights and document understanding. How exactly do I learn more about document understanding in general? How exactly should I kind of get started and focusing on best practices for building the automations? There was a webinar that recently got put out from some team members and then also a customer. This was done yesterday. I think that they're posting a link for this webinar in the Zoom chat. I think Sophia will post a link, but would recommend taking a look at this. It's a great place for you to go ahead and have some of those questions we saw in the chat answered as well. And then I will pass it back to Christina to go ahead and wrap up with next steps.
Thank you. Let me switch sharing screen now. And I will ask Sophia to kindly share also these links for the next dev dive session in the series in the chat, so you can just join. Or I can also try to copy the link for the next series. Oh, I see Roxana is already sharing them. So as you know, Dev Dives is a year-long series, and we are also planning to move it into next year, but this year it will continue for sure until December. The October sessions are already published, and you will find them on the Dev Dives page, and this is the link for the Dev Dives page right here. I'll put it in chat now. You can access it, and there you can see all the past sessions, all the recordings and decks from the past sessions, and as well the upcoming sessions published for October. And very soon we will also publish the upcoming sessions for November this year. And then we have just one more month left till end of the year, December, when we will have another session, of course. So explore the whole year in Dev Dives. It was an impressive series this year across the UiPath platform. So plenty of valuable content within the series. I strongly encourage you to explore it. And now I think we can move into live Q&A. And I will make sure that you are able to unmute. Okay, so I think everyone is able to unmute now. And I will also take a short look at the chat to see whether we have anything left unanswered. Though I saw Daniel was really active and Lahiru as well. So let's see. I think most of the last questions were answered. So Yes, is anyone willing to open up the mic and ask a question either to Daniel or Lahiru? I see we have a request to share the link for yesterday's webinar. Sophia, if we have that link to the webinar and we can share it in chat maybe. And now let's see.
We did, but I'll share it again.
Okay. Yeah, if we have requests. So let's see who wants to ask any question regarding today's session and presentation.
Yeah, I have one question. I just wanted
Okay.
to know whether or not we, is there a template, a demo template that could be downloaded from, let's say, Marketplace, and we could run a small instance of an example of what Lahiru was showing today? Almost like a shared project, something that we could download just as an example on our local machines.
For the one that I created, no, but I can try to create a template and share it.
And just a question on that piece. So is that tied to the specific, to just see specifically what Lahiru and team created, or is that tied to just kind of seeing how document processing automations look like when they're built?
Either or. Obviously, Lahiru's example would be great, just to have a mini version of that, so we could just plug and play our own sample documents and see how we could tweak based on that template. It doesn't need to be a completely formed template, but just a quick example of what Lahiru had, and then we could plug and play our own documents and see how we can play around with it.
Cool. Yeah. Would also recommend checking out the document understanding process template in Studio, which usually has kind of key components, the solution accelerators as well that we mentioned. And then if you're looking to just kind of see some preliminary results for how documents are being processed, you can actually use the extraction automation builder in Automation Cloud to upload a document and just start to generate some results with a Studio web workflow. Just to really see, hey, just, baseline performance, how are the out-of-the-box models processing my documents?
Thank you, Daniel. Actually, we have, so I will ask Dino to unmute now.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Christina and Daniel. With respect to the generative AI predict, some of the pre-built model, it has a good prediction level or about with respect to the ML extraction of these attributes. But if we see some of those attributes are not coming up as we expected, given there is wide variety of document that we have, what is a better way to retrain those model, given the scope or the number of templates within that document could vary wildly. So what's better way of retraining those generative AI predict models?
So if I understood the question correctly, you're using the generative AI capabilities to kind of get some results from processing documents. And the question is, how exactly do you fine tune the Gen AI models? Just want to verify that.
Correct. Given wide variety of the documents that I have to retrain those specific models.
So right now, those Gen AI models that are available in parallel to the specialized models, those specialized models are the ones available in AI Center in the document understanding service. Those Gen AI models, those within the document understanding platform, those are not fine tunable yet. So those are not retrainable. So you pass in an input, you get an output, but the validated data that you get isn't used to retrain that Gen AI model. You can use the output data to go ahead and take that data point and add it to your training data set for your specialized model. So the same feedback loop that you would use for your specialized model, you can also use as taking the output from that Gen AI prediction.
Okay, so the pre-built model is not retrainable. I guess we have to generate another model from the scratch, or we can take the existing model and then retrain on top of it.
The Gen AI model that you're referencing, which is a kind of a service available right now in preview, that is the one not retrainable. A specialized model, so something like the invoices out of the box model, for example, that you see in AI Center, that is retrainable.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have an unanswered question in the chat from Scott Brownlow. Scott, can you please unmute yourself, since the question is quite complex regarding the use case? If Scott is still here.
Sure, I'm here.
Okay, hello, Scott.
So what we're looking at is we have several documents that are mostly related to purchase orders. And with the variation of the documents, what we have is these documents coming from multiple customers. Therefore, they're very different in format. So I kind of had two questions about it. One was, should we try using the purchase order AI model that exists to be able to process these documents, even though some of them are related to purchase orders, but are not purchase orders? So that's the first one.
My recommendation is that it can't hurt. So you have two options. You can start, and sorry, I wish I actually, could I share slides? Is that possible? So you have two options. You can start with the document understanding general package, or you can use that purchase order model. And what I would do is I would just see, cool, perfect. Yeah, I'm trying to find the right slide. I would see what model performance works best for your use case. Most likely, you're going to get some benefit from using the purchase order model that you have available as a good head start to get some of the fields processed more accurately.
Okay. The second part of the question was about the varying formats of the documents. Because we are getting these PO related documents, should they all be thrown into a single project within DU to be able to do the training and everything? And by the way, I'm a beginner at DU, so wrong terms will be used everywhere. But should it be a single project and treat all the documents as part of the training and allow the classifier to figure out what's what? Or should we have separate pipelines or potentially models to be able to deal with it?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about training a classifier and you have multiple document types that you want to classify, within the document understanding service, if you're using the model-based classifier, and let me see if I can actually go ahead and actually show you guys. So I'll share my screen here. You should be able to see something like this, where I can go ahead and create a classifier. And then if you've created document types, you can go ahead and select those document types. And then each of those document types will be linked to a data labeling session. So I can go ahead and actually, upload documents to this invoices document manager or document labeling session. And each of the documents you upload into those document types will be used to train the classifier. So it's important that you separate out all the samples for each of the document types, and then you upload the samples for their to the corresponding document type labeling session.
Okay. And the separation of the document type should really be on business process and content. So if I have 3 different customers sending me purchase orders, yes, they're all purchase orders, so they should be a single document type, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Got
so
it.
The main differentiation is kind of document type. Usually it's what fields do I need to process from that document? And the fields are usually linked to, as you mentioned, the business process requirements for processing that document.
Good. Thanks. That answers all my questions.
Great.
Thank you, Scott, for the questions. And Guy, I think, is next in line. Guy Wiggins, can you please unmute? I've seen the question is also in the chat, but please, would you like to unmute?
Thank you. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Great. So I work for a law firm, and we're very interested in trying to use UiPath and document understanding to basically work with unstructured legal documents, so we can extract information from them, potentially summarize them, that kind of thing. I'm a little bit confused about what we need to do to get going. In order to use these new LLMs that are in preview, do we need a document understanding license? I guess that's the first question. And two, if it's in preview, like what's required to actually start, kicking the tires on it? And does UiPath offer services that we could hire to help us kind of get started on this? I doubt there's any solution accelerators out there for this. I imagine it's mostly focused on more structured documents like invoices and purchase orders and that kind of thing. But we deal with mostly unstructured documents and not structured documents.
Yeah. So for the last question around do we have services that can help? Yes. So I recommend if you have an account executive tied to kind of your guys' organization, recommend reaching out to them and just letting them know, hey, looking for some assistance, kind of getting up and running here. Do you guys have professional services available? And then tied to the questions around using the Gen AI capabilities. So if you have a community license right now, the Gen AI capabilities are available in public preview via Automation Cloud. And then if any of your developers have access to Studio, you can actually download the preview packages and start to use those in your automations. So you can start to kind of generate results or do some testing on those legal documents you have to see how well they get summarized or how well some information gets extracted using those Gen AI capabilities.
Okay. And what is the model? Are you guys using the Microsoft OpenAI, or do you have your own LLM? I'm just curious what model is actually behind, working with these Gen AI.
Yes.
I know one of the things that I understand is that you guys are very flexible. So I guess you have your own core LLM, but if you want to use a different one, you can plug additional ones in. But talk a bit about that. And also, what's the pricing? Is it ChatGPT 3.5? Is it 4.0? How does it work in terms of the pricing?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try and tackle each of those. So pricing I can't speak to because it hasn't been announced yet, but will be shortly. Okay. So you should be seeing some announcements on the pricing for using those Gen AI capabilities pretty soon here. The Gen AI integration right now is linked to the Microsoft Azure OpenAI service. And there's some details that your account team can provide you in terms of data privacy and data retention and kind of help clarify some concerns that you usually have with that. I think you'll be,
that's right.
You'll want to have that conversation with them just for timing wise. And then in addition to that, our team is creating that flexible framework you mentioned, right? We're pretty much going to have the ability for you to take other LLMs out there and integrate those into your automation workflows so that you can make sure you get the most efficient, most accurate automation for processing your documents or processing whatever transactions you have in your use case.
I see. Okay, so you guys are working on that. That's something probably we'll see next year sometime. But right now it's because
probably closer than next year.
Yeah. So right now it is the OpenAI, because you're right. The security is very important. We're going to need to. The last thing that our lawyers want is an LLM that is used that can extract confidential information and make it available to through the OpenAI service. So what you're saying is that doesn't happen. This is all containerized, but we will need to get very specific on that to assuage our attorneys for sure. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No, and our internal team can share those specifics with you and kind of make sure that security teams from your front and our front are on the same page as to how exactly data gets processed.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. It's helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Problem.
Okay. Thank you, Guy. And Julian, would you like to unmute, please? Julian Sechu. Okay.
Yeah. Hi. Hey guys. Thanks for the presentation. Just one question. It's been bugging me for a while now. Maybe there's a way, or if not, do you plan to integrate this in the future to sort of unify the classification validation station with the data extraction validation station? Because it's kind of annoying to have a human user having to do two validations for the same document. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So something our team is looking into. One of the kind of, I think, things that make it difficult is that if you have the classification validation task and the document type changes, you got to go ahead and actually then start processing the document using the extraction capabilities, and there's a bit of a delay for the user to kind of have that information processed. And there might also be steps in between. You might actually kind of have the robot just file that document elsewhere and not actually extract information from that document. So that, I think that is something to kind of recap, something our team is looking into, but there are some intricacies, and we want to make sure that we get the most streamlined experience and best user experience for you if we do indeed consolidate those tasks.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rian and Viru. Now for the last question. Hello, Viru. Viru, can you unmute, please? Or can you? I see you still have your hand raised. Okay.
While I'm happy to, so I can actually, there's a good question around from Annie around, hey, I have like kind of a use case with many variations. How should I go about kind of identifying, you know, how I collect samples to bring into my model training data set? I think this was also something that was asked previously. So a couple of things, there's a tool or an assistant built into the document understanding service, as well as the document labeling sessions, that helps you plug in some inputs like what out-of-box document type are you using, if you're using that, or if it's just custom, and then what fields you're going to be using and processing in your use case, what languages and number of layouts you expect to see. And this gives you a recommended data set size. So this will actually tell you, hey, I know I need to start with around 150 to 540 pages. The next step is, okay, well, I know the range of documents I need to train my model. I know I have 1,000 vendors or 1,000 customers that I receive documents from. The next step is that you should look at the distribution that you're receiving documents from each of those vendors. And I would recommend, you know, the best practice is making sure that your training data set is balanced, but also representative of what you process in production. So if you receive 70% of the documents from 10 vendors, I would make sure that I have samples from those 10 vendors in my training data set. And then for the remaining samples, you can go ahead and do a random sampling from, you know, the other 990 vendors that you have available in your document population. So the key thing is, I think, getting to the range of documents you need for your model training data set, and then going ahead and actually kind of understanding the distribution of documents that you receive from your document population and the distribution of those layouts, and then making sure that your training data set is balanced and representative of that document population. Cool. Sorry, Virup, if I overtook
Virup, would you like
question.
to try again to unmute, Virup? Or to see whether you're audible? Anyway, the question is in the chat, Daniel, if you wish to take a look at it, of Virup's question regarding multiple purchase orders without page numbers.
Sure, yeah, so my team has multiple purchase orders and they don't have page numbers. Indeed, it has a rubber stamp, which means end of PO. Using DU, how can I extract the details from multiple pages and create multiple orders where the automation has to understand that the rubber stamp is the end of the PO? So I think the key thing here for this classification task, it sounds like you're looking to identify, hey, from this packet of information, how do I split the input packet into its respective purchase orders? So one, I would recommend looking into the intelligent keyword classifier to see how well that splitting operation performs. And the other key thing is actually seeing if the OCR engines can identify this rubber stamp. If there's text on the rubber stamp, then you might be in a good spot where you can try and identify the text that is usually on that rubber stamp and kind of hard code a rule in your automation to say, hey, if you see this text that's tied to the rubber stamp, go ahead and use that as my splitting cue or trigger. If there is no text, and it might be difficult to use document understanding, you might have to integrate something like object detection or image analysis model to try and identify that image that's on the POs to go ahead and perform that splitting step.
Okay, Virup, I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry, but we're getting very close to the end. I will take just this one last question from V. Harris. Okay. Come on,
Hi.
Hero. But this is the very last question we're taking because we're already almost half an hour overboard.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Valerie.
Oh,
Thank
hi,
you for
Valerie.
taking my question. It's just a question in regards to the dataset estimator. Is that what Daniel was talking about a moment ago, where
Yep.
when you're setting up a semi-structured AI, does that still go for like models that are already, out of the box? Like you still have to submit that many documents for training if it's an out of the box model?
No. Well, so couple of things. So this applies if you're looking to create a specialized model. So if you're just looking to use the out of the box models, and the out of the box model fields support your business requirements, then you can use those and start to see how well those perform. What we often see customers doing is they create their own specialized models that are based on our out of the box models, because they can customize the actual model schema. So they can say, hey, from these out of the box fields, I want to include these 6, but then also for, I want to include 3 other custom regular fields because I have those that are custom and specific to my business use case. So as long as the out of the box model requirements provide you what you need, you can get started with those. But it is, I think, beneficial, very beneficial in my opinion, to go through this exercise of creating a specialized model, because it's a custom tailored and curated specialized model for your specific use case and your document population.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sure thing.
Okay, I'm sorry for the questions that remained unanswered. I know you guys have a lot of questions. We'll try to find a way to create maybe a form thread or something, and to make sure you receive the log with the questions and answer for this session. There are still many questions in the chat, and I see many people still wanting to ask questions. So thank you for the great engagement on this session. I see there is like huge curiosity, and especially towards industry implementation and use cases. So yeah, perhaps we will follow up on this, and we'll try to make some tools available for you to continue the inquiry for us to get some answers. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Daniel, Lahiru, thank you very much. Sophia.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Many
you. Bye.
thanks.
And see you next month. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.